Hello there, welcome to saberduelgaming, where we always take the high ground, and welcome to our retro review of Injustice: Gods Among Us. Injustice, whilst obviously a DC property, is actually created by the same people behind the Mortal Kombat series. If that wasn't noticeable from the combat style, it should be a giveaway, with Scorpion being one of the main roster. But this is certainly no negative. The Mortal Kombat games later in the series began to really hone down on fantastic story elements, and rather than just settling for one-on-one combat, it allowed that story to create a fantastic one-player mode. And Injustice: Gods Among Us takes that concept, merges it with the fantastic characters established within the DC franchise, and turns the volume up substantially. The one-player story mode takes place across two realities, our own, in which things are really looking down, and an alternate reality in which things have already gone absolutely to hell, with Superman running a fascist regime following horrific events that turned him to the dark side. Rather than play as one particular character that you choose, the game will hurl you from one character to another as the story swaps across characters and locations, meaning you get to play as a whole range of different characters. There is also another game mode called Battles, in which you can choose from a number of different battles, different combat scenarios, basically running a gauntlet with certain requirements put into effect. These range from pretty simple to obscenely challenging. You then pick your character and begin your fight, working your way through the opponents with the specific requirements in effect. And at the end of each of these battle modes, depending on which character you chose to play as, you will be treated to a specific individualized cutscene telling the story of that character. It's pretty cool. Obviously, you can still do a basic versus in either single player or two player, and this is where everything comes into effect. After all, none of those game modes are going to be worth a lick of salt if the actual combat isn't any good. So, how was it received when it was released? The official Xbox magazine labelled that all-important combat gameplay as fast, destructive and easily accessible, and GameSpot magazine agreed, calling it a complex fighter full of unique twists. Overall, the game actually managed to achieve 8 different awards, most of them focusing on Fighter of the Year. However, interestingly enough, its scores and ratings were rather inconsistent. If we focus mostly on the PS4 and Xbox 360 versions of the game, the scores narrow down slightly, but they still range between the low to mid 80s all the way up to 95%. You could argue, because of the type of game it is, it would depend on how much of a fan you are of the DC universe, as well as how much of a fan you are of one-on-one fighting games. But being a fan of the DC universe wouldn't automatically mean you like this game. GameSpot's Maxwell McGee labelled the game as silly bordering on parody. He apparently felt that the concept for the story was absolutely ridiculous, although anyone being a fan of comic books and finding alternate realities ridiculous is a little bit ridiculous in itself. This is a basic premise, and certainly something that's been explored in multiple comic books, and for me, I think it's a really unique way of explaining why you can have two characters the same fighting each other, two versions of Superman, two versions of the Flash. It also allows you to justify why villains fight villains and heroes fight heroes. I don't really know what his problem was. Whilst the game garnered high praise for its graphics in some aspects, other people were quite critical of the cutscenes, feeling that they were quite rough and very basically put together. I personally don't see this. I thought the animation was pretty decent. I guess it just depends on how demanding you are of the graphics in a game. But how do those graphics, gameplay, and everything else stand up now? Well, I didn't play this game when it first came out in 2013. I actually played it a good few years later, but even in making this review, I was amazed to realise that this game is 10 years old. Granted, I've never been someone who was particularly judgmental of graphics in games, but either way, the graphics in this for what type of game it is, stand up absolutely fine to me. While the battle mode is a cool addition, and the Star Labs mode where you can unlock certain things is really cool too, the main thing for me was whether the combat was going to be good, the story mode was going to be enjoyable, and the 2-player version of the game was going to be fun to play. And all of those get a resounding thumbs up. First of all, the story mode that garnered a little bit of criticism is fantastic. It's brilliant to see Superman as a villain, to see some of your favourite characters having caved under his rule. Meanwhile, seeing villains potentially standing up for what's right. It gives an interesting twist, and it allows you to feel guilt-free as you beat up on some of your favourites. Personally feel that the story is better than most stories DC have managed in movies recently, so there's nothing to criticise there. The actual combat itself, though relatively simple, is fun. There's plenty of interactive elements with the environment. There's the wages where you pick a random button, charge at each other and see who gets whooped. Granted, some could argue that the lack of Mortal Kombat style fatalities is a bit of a downer. However, it's not a Mortal Kombat game, so why should it have fatalities? There's plenty of special moves and bonus attacks, so I think that's absolutely fine as it is. And for me personally, the designs of the characters are pretty damn good. As a 2-player game, it is fantastically easy and fun to play. It doesn't take a great deal of learning. Pretty much anyone would be able to pick up and play this quite quickly. So it's easy, arcade style, 2-player fun. Not really much else you could ask for there. Overall, Injustice Gods Among Us is a fantastically fun and easy game to pick up and play. For me, 1v1 combat games are at their best when they're kept simple, and Injustice does that perfectly, and for me gets an 8.5 out of 10. What do you think? Comment below, let me know, and until next time, take the high ground.